Hello, my name is Carl Surrey, and this is a new video tutorial for the Facebook group fans of Serif software. Now in this tutorial I want to look at two different ways of changing the color, pre-existing color of objects in an image, and the two objects I want to change is the red of this post box and the color of the fence. They'll both be done in different ways. So I like to start first with the post box. Now what I'm going to need to do here is to select this post box, the red area. Now you can use the cutout studio, which is found up here in the toolbar running along the top. Now I personally, I don't know why, but I struggle using the cutout studio. There is a pretty good video tutorial on YouTube which was actually made by Serif themselves, which explains how to use that tool, but I just can't get on with it, I'm afraid. So what I'm going to use is the lasso tool, which is found over here in the tools toolbar, and I'm going to use the polygon selection tool. Now this can be just as awkward as the cutout studio, because you have to click around the edge of the object that you want slowly and carefully, because if you do it too quickly, or if like me you've got a very oversensitive mouse, the program sort of detects it as a double click and will complete the selection for you, and it may not be what you are after. So if you come up here to the top of the options bar just above the image, you've got 4 squares here, and the first one is to make a new selection. This is what we will be doing. Then you can add to selection, subtract from selection, and intersect selections. I don't think I've ever used that one, but I'm going to start off with a new selection, and then I'm going to go on to add to selection. So I'm going to zoom in to the base of this letterbox, and you find a place where you want to start, and you just click once, and this is going to be the start position, and then you just move the cursor, and as you can see it's got a sort of a tail hanging behind it, and then you click to the next part where you want, and then it will draw the line around the area that you want to select. Like I said, if you do this slowly and simple single clicks, it will work better than if you sort of really rush at it. And it is fairly time consuming, and I will freely admit that probably using the cutout studio option is much better. But I can, as I see, this is what happens here. I just accidentally clicked too quickly, and it has completed that selection for me. And at this point, I was lucky because the selection is in an area that I want. Sometimes it won't do, and you'll have to restart or find a new way of doing it. Now, this is where I would then go to add selection. So now, rather than starting all over again, I will just add to this selection that's already made. So I will click inside this previous selection. Doesn't really matter where. I'll start here, somewhere memorable really. I'll start here at this corner, and then just carry on from where the previous selection, so it's just finished off, just reselect it again. It is a very sensitive tool. So you just keep going around the image. And what I sometimes do is I'll go mad a bit, go over to here, and then come down the other side. Come inside this previous selection, and then join up, deliberately join up where I started from. And when you get to where you started from, when it's anywhere else, you get a little plus sign next to the lasso. But when you get to where you're starting to, it changes to a square. So if you click there, all that is now selected. So you can then carry on now and add to that selection, which is what I prefer to do when using the polygon tool. I do it in sections, keep adding to it, rather than try and go around a really big object. It's just done it again. Right, going around a really big object just for it to make its own selection area, and it's not the area you want, and you have to go all the way back to the beginning and try again. It is a laborious process, but unfortunately it's one I have to deal with because I don't get on with the cutout studio. Right, so I will come back in a minute. I will continue with this, and I will come back when I've finished selecting the whole of the letterbox. Welcome back. Now, as you can see, I've virtually finished selecting this postbox. All I need to do is just finish this bit off around the mouth of the letterbox. So I will zoom in to that area, because if you're going to do it in sections like I do, it's easier if you can zoom in because you can see better the edge that you are trying to select. So I'll just make this final selection, hopefully all in one piece. And as you can see, like I said, by zooming in, obviously the image becomes very pixelated, but you can work out where the edges are much easier. And if you've got a very intricate bit that's got a lot of ins and outs, obviously you would be clicking very close together and you're more likely to make the final selection. Whereas if you zoom in, those areas will be further apart and you're less likely to make the computer think there's a double click. The only problem I find with this tool is the icon for the tool, because it's that big lasso with the plus sign next to it, and it's not so bad when you're coming down the right hand side of an image, but if you're coming down the left hand side of an image, it sometimes gets in the way of the area you're trying to see and select, so it can be a bit awkward that way. Right, so that should be the whole of the letterbox selected. Now, before I rush off and do anything else, I will zoom back in again. And I've not made the most perfect of selections here. I mean, if you do it on your own images, you can take your time. But there are some areas where, like that section there, where I've missed the part of the red, the fence area has been taken in. So what I can do, if I come back up here and then do subtract from selection, if I start outside of the selected area, click once, come down, and then I think I missed a little bit there, and then come up there, and it back to the start position. It will take that away. Now I know there's a selection area at the top of this post box. Quite a big area actually. Well, I didn't do such a good job of selecting. So again, what I'll do is I'll click outside of the selection area, come down to this where I want to touch the red of the letterbox, and then go along the top here, and then come back to the start position, and that will improve the selected area better than I originally did it. There's another bit here where I went a bit mad over the top of the letterbox. So as you can see, you can always edit a little bit after you've made your main selection and just tidy it up areas where you didn't do as good a job as you would like. Again, I do this in small sections. It's so much easier than trying to do it all in one fell swoop. That's not too bad there. So what I'll do is come back. That'll do. I'm not going to clean it up anymore, but if you was doing this yourself, you would clean it up and make a much better selection of it. Right. So the next thing we need to do is just maybe feather this selection slightly. Not a vast amount. Now we come up to the button at the top of the screen here, which is Modify Selection. And here you've got the feather slider. Now I'm just going to go up to maybe 2. Let's try 2. I'll click 2. Okay. And that will just slowly, slightly fade the edges of the selection area, so it won't be so harsh. And then I'll zoom out a bit. That's it there. So now what I want to do is to take this selection and make a new layer of just the selection. Now you can do this from layers, new, layer from selection copy, or you can just press Control and J, which is what I will do in this case. Let's get rid of that menu, just Control and J. And as you down here in the layers display area, you now have 2 layers, the original image and then the layer that has got just a letterbox. What I can do is if I turn off the background layer, there you have the selection of just the letterbox. The next thing we want to do is to add a hue, saturation and lightness adjustment tool as a layer above the cutout layer that you have here. So what I'm going to do is just click on it here, and it will add the tool here with a layer mask which will protect the outside area, which is in the black, and the only area that will be affected will be the white area, which is where the selection was made. Now above that layer display area is the tool itself. Running along the top here you have all the different channels that can be altered. Now the multicolored one is the original image, which is like red, green, blue, and then you can alter just the red channel or the yellow channel, green, blue, or cyan, dark blue, or magenta. Now as in my particular image, the image I want to change is red, I'm going to click on the red channel, so it will now affect the red. And if the sliders below that, one of those is the hue slider. Now if I move the hue slider to the left, it will change the colour to the blue areas of the colour spectrum, and if I move it to the right, it will move it to the yellows and greens colours of the spectrum. Okay. So what I'll do, we'll go for a, let's go for a blue, I think, rather outlandish dark blue. There you go. And then that is really the first part of this tutorial finished, because I have done what I set out to do, and which is change the colour of the postbox. Now obviously I'm doing this very quickly, and I've not necessarily made a great job of the area down here where the person who painted the paint box went over the black areas of the base, and there's still some red showing around the bottom here. But you could always reselect these areas or do a better job than I did. But for a quick look at how to do this, I will leave it as it stands. So the next part of this tutorial is the changing the colour of the fence. So to change the colours of the fence, I'm going to do it in a slightly different way, and I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to use the paintbrush. So the first thing I need to do is to make a new blank layer. If you come down to the bottom of the layer display area, you've got 3 or 4 or 5 icons. Currently there's only 3 I could actually use. These other ones are blanked out. The first one is a white square with a red cross in it, which, if I click on that, will open up the new layer panel. Now I'm going to change the blending mode of this layer from the outset, and I'm going to change it to colour. Then click OK. So as you can see now in the layer display area, there is a blank layer with absolutely nothing on it. So what I need to do now is select the brush tool. Now you can do this by just pressing B on the keyboard, or coming over here to the Tools toolbar and selecting the paintbrush, which I already have done. Now we need to select a colour to paint onto this blank layer. Now currently this is set at black for the foreground, white for the background. There's a little icon above here which you can switch those around if you want. And if you ever want to return back to the default of black and white, you can do that as well. But I want a sort of a brown colour for the fence. So what I'm going to do is double click inside the foreground colour box, and it will open the colour selector. Now I'm looking for, let me just move out of the way slightly, a sort of browny red colour. Now you can select the colour range, spectrum colour range, from this bar down the side here. So this is like getting sort of dirty yellow orangey colours. Let's come up a bit more so it's a bit more browner. That's a bit better. And then if you click anywhere on inside this main colour thing, it will select the colour. As you can see there, the old colour was black and the new colour will be this brown. So I mean, you can continue to click around this and find a colour that you are happy with, which is, I'm going to go for this sort of darker brown colour. Maybe not so dark, let's come down to there. And then when you're happy with the colour you want, just click OK. And as you can now see up here, brown is now the foreground colour, and it will be the colour that I will be painting on these rather dull looking grey fence post slats. So at the moment, as you can see by this small round cursor that I've got floating around here, the size of the brush is rather small for such a large area. I mean, I can use a small brush size when I get near the edges, But what I'll do is I'll run along the top of the picture here of the various options for the brush tool, and currently the size is set on 43. So what I'll do is I'll click there and then move the arrow to increase the size. I'm going to go up to, say, about 200-ish. So you've got a fairly nice big size brush there. So now if I paint, just click and move around, it will alter the colour of the fence posts. And obviously if you're getting close to something, don't go, well, especially with a big brush, do not go too close to the edges. Now you can also lower the size of the brush by the square bracket keys. The left one will reduce the size and the right one will increase the size. So rather than keep going up the top, you can just use your keyboard and reduce the size as you need it. You can also zoom in on the image, keep reducing the size of the brush, and then come up and carefully come close to objects that you obviously don't want to paint over. Being as careful as you can. And if, for example, you do go over, right, like that, obviously you can always use the undo button, or you can use the delete tool and come back down and delete them off. So you've got two options of correcting any mistakes you might make, like that, and then come back to the brush tool and carry on where you finished off. Again, I'm not going to go too hyper worried about how exact I'm doing it, because this is only for demonstration purposes. Obviously when you do this, you will take your time. See, I've just gone over a bit over the letterbox here, and these small objects which I deliberately went over, I'm going to come back and take a little bit more time to just delete the brown that I painted over the top of them, because it's sometimes I personally find it easier to sort of clean up. I'll just go over everything pretty much like a steamroller and then go back and just tidy up a little bit. Right, so then go back to the brush tool and then carry on. Just clicking, reducing the size of the brush tool as and when needed. And if you're using the keyboard to reduce the size of the brush head, you can use one hand to use the mouse and guide the brush tool around, and then just use the other hand to alter the key with the keys to increase the size and lower the size depending on what it is you're trying to do. Right, I think that's pretty much okay for that side of the letterbox. Now in my haste of all the clicking and moving around, I accidentally clicked on making a brightness layer here. I'll just keep it there for now. It may come in handy later. So I'll just hide it and reselect the layer I was painting. So I can go back to the painting tool, paintbrush, and start painting the other side of the fence. I'll zoom in again, and obviously because this side of the letterbox, the fence is darker, the brown that I'm painting onto it will look darker, but that's okay because that's the way it should be. I'll reduce the size to come round the edge of the letterbox. Again, I'm not being too fussy because it is only just for showing you how it works. A bit down there, and that's probably pretty much as good as it's going to get. I'll just quickly get the erase tool and just take some of the brown off that foliage that's growing out down there. Right, so I'll zoom out, and that is pretty much both versions of these changing colours finished, because we got the change colour which is using the hue slider, and we have the change colour fence which is using the paintbrush tool. Now, just as soon as I've accidentally made this layer, what I'll do is I will unhide the top layer, which is now the brightness and contrast tool, and then if you click on it to highlight it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip it to just the fence layer. So I will right click here, come up to clip to layer below. It will move to the right, and which means it will now only affect this layer below it, which is where I've painted. So I can now change the brightness. So if I go I can make it darker, or it will almost go back to the grey that I started out on. Make it brighter. So you could change the colour slightly from where I started from. So I'll just make it slightly yellower. Again, you can alter the contrast. I mean, this was just an accident. I wouldn't necessarily have done this to start with, but as I've got it here, I might as well just show to you that even though you've picked a colour, there are different ways to alter that colour that you've painted on, even after the painting on and selecting of the colour. You do still have options. Right, I think I will finish that tutorial there, because we've now got a blue letterbox and a browner fence. Obviously you could go around the whole picture and change the colour of everything. I mean, the hardest one to do, I think, would have been the black. It's very difficult to change black, I found anyway when I tried it. So, but hopefully you have learnt something from that, and I thank you very much for your time. Don't forget to check out the Fans of Serif Software Facebook page, where there are many downloadable written tutorials, this being one of them, and I will see you then later. Thank you very much.